Hey guys, this is Carrie, and in this video we are finally going to be adding sound to our JavaScript soundboard. So the whole idea of a soundboard, right, is that when you click these guys, it'll actually play a sound. And you're gonna have to take my word for it when I do code this, because you won't be able to hear the sounds over the headphones that I'm using to record this. So let's get started. I should say as a caveat before really starting the JavaScript, you do want to make sure that you have all 6 images correct and correlated to 6 sounds. I'm only going to show you with 1 sound or 2 sounds, so I just have my 1 or 2 sounds here. So make sure you have 6 of each. Alright, so the very first thing that we're going to need to do in order to get our sounds to play is we actually need to make sure that these sound files are included on our website. Now these sound files, just like adding images to our website, adding a sound file is adding content to our website. So we're going to need to add these in the HTML, since these are content being added to the site. So here we go. In our HTML, and this can actually go kind of anywhere in the HTML, these audio files, I'm going to do them right before the script tag at the bottom. And the reason why is these files will not show up on the page as playable files. It's just adding this media to our website. Right now this media is in our folder, but it's not on the HTML page, so we can't access it. So here we go. I'm going to type in audio. Actually I'd like to see if it does the autocomplete here. Oh, I just think it autocompletes that. Let me just see if I can do it this way. There we go, that's better. If you just type audio without the tag, then it will put in the whole audio tag for you. Now, similar to an image, we need to specify the source. And just like when we added our own images from a file where we put the file name, you're just going to put just the sound name as the source here because it's in the same folder as the .html file. So and this is a bad name. I should have done an easier one to count here, but I think it's 4Rs .m4a. And we're going to do another audio element. So audio tab, or audio enter, I believe, and I'm going to do zombie1-wave. Just to remind you, one of these was a sound that we recorded using QuickTime, and the other is a sound that we downloaded from the internet. Because these are sound files, .m4a, .wav, .mp3, they should work great with this. So you're going to put all 6 of your sound files on the HTML page. Now when I run the HTML page, you won't be able to see those sound files. You won't be able to see those sound files at all. To play those sound files, what we need to do is we actually need to link these up with these buttons that we made. Well, really images, but we're using them as buttons. All right, so here's how we do this. This is a big step for us. So we're going to be using JavaScript to basically make the page interactive. So we're going to go over to the JavaScript file, and the very first thing that we're going to do is we're going to test to make sure that the page is linked in. So it should be linked in, because I see down here the script tag means that it's going to be running the JavaScript. But let's make sure for real. So I'm just going to have it alert out page running. And this will help me debug an initial code, which could be that the code is not running. And I'm just going to pull this off to the side here, slide this over, so that when I test it, I can test it easily on the full page, because I like that better. All right, so the page is running. We got the alert. I don't like getting this alert every time, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to delete it. Okay, next up, what we're going to do is we need to actually, similar to CSS here, in order to select, or in order to style an element, like when we wanted to change the heights of the images and stuff, we had to select them and then add styles. It's going to be a similar pattern for JavaScript. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be selecting our elements, kind of like we did here by selecting the image, or selecting the thing with class content, and then doing stuff with it. In JavaScript, the way of selecting looks a little more complicated. But the good news is I made it a cheat sheet for us, so we don't even have to worry about memorizing it. So here we go. For selecting an element in JavaScript, this is the line of code that we use. And I gave you a little note here. We're going to replace the phrase CSS selector with a CSS selector for the object you are selecting. All right, so here we go. The ones that we're going to have to select on the page is we're going to have to select each of these images and each of our audio elements. Which actually, maybe I didn't do a good job with my HTML. I have to go back. If I want to select each of these images separate and each of these audio elements separate, the only way that we can select single images or single audio elements is if we give them an ID. So I'm going to go into the first image here, and I'm going to give it an ID of image 1. I'm going to give my second one an ID of image 2. And so forth. Oh, that's not 2, that's 1. And so forth. What these are going to let us do is it's going to select each individual image and give it its own sound. So here we go. Oh, I keep putting that extra space. All right, just using some copy and paste here to make sure that all of our images are selectable. And I'm going to do the same thing for our audio files. In addition to adding the source here, I'm going to give this an ID of audio 1 because it's the first audio sound, and so forth for each one of these up through 6. You should have 6 of these audio tags on your page. Now that we've given them their own identifiers, we can select them using JavaScript individually. So if we want to select the first one, let's just remember the ID is image 1. So here's how we do that. Let variable name equal document.querySelector, and then we're supposed to put the CSS selector here. So what the CSS selector is, if we wanted to select just image 1, we would put hashtag image 1. And that's exactly what we put here in the JavaScript as well. Now when we select this, in order to use this image later on, we actually have to store this thing that we selected in a variable name. I think a good variable name for this would be image 1, since this refers to the first image on the page. We also need to select the second image on the page. So let's let image 2, that's a variable name. It could have been anything we wanted it to be. But the way we're going to select image 2 is we're going to say image 2, this one, we gave that an ID of image 2. So we use the hashtag for ID and image 2 here. You're going to have a couple more lines of code here to select all of your images. And we're also going to select all of our audio files. So I'm going to say let audio equal that. And we're going to select the thing with audio 1 as its ID, because that was the ID, right? Let me just make sure. Yeah, audio 1. And then we also need audio 2. You're going to have all the way up through audio 6. So we're selecting all of these things so that we can apply JavaScript to them this time. And it's very similar to what we did with CSS, right? Where we had to select these things to apply style to them. Now we're selecting them to apply functionality. All right, so I think we've got everything selected that we're going to need to select on the page. Cool. All right, let's see. Next up, let me show you something here, which is sometimes in JavaScript it's useful when we're learning how to code or when we're writing programs or when we're going to read our programs later to write little notes to ourselves about what we are doing. To do that, you put 2 slashes, and it should make the text green. This is called a comment in JavaScript, and it's not code that's read. It's basically information for you or for somebody reading your code. So I'm going to write what I did here. Select all of the images. And it's a good tool for teaching too. And here we're going to say, what we did here was we select all of the audio elements. All right, so then the next thing that we need to do is make it so that when we click an image, it plays a sound. All right. Well, the code for this looks a little bit intimidating, actually, but it's on the cheat sheet. And the cheat sheet really isn't a cheat sheet. This is sort of what programmers do. We think about what function do we want, and then we just bring it in. So when we interact with the page, that's something called an event. And in order to listen for any events, we're going to add event listeners to the page. Now I put a note here. It says make sure to copy all 4 lines. So if you look from line 28 to 31, this is all that we need to copy here. So let's copy this and bring this into the page. So this looks like a lot, but it's actually really clear if you go through it part by part. What we do here for the element is we say, okay, which element on the page is the user interacting with? If we're going to click this Dexter icon, that would be image 1. because we've already selected image 1 and called it image 1 up here, what we're going to say is take image 1 and add an event listener to it. How is the user going to interact with this? There's a variety of ways, but the way in this case is going to be the user is going to click that. Okay? And then down here, what we can do is we can run any procedure that we want when Dexter is clicked. To start off, I'm just going to add an alert here to make sure that my click is working. And I think you should too, because adding these alert statements along the way, even though we're going to delete them later, will help you to debug your code before you even encounter any errors. So I'm going to write Dexter has been clicked. All right. Looks good to me. Let me run my page to make sure it's working. And when I click this, Dexter has been clicked. Cool. Now before we add the audio in here, I just want to show you how easy this is to do for image 2, actually. For image 2, I want to do the same thing. I want to add an event listener to image 2. So I highly recommend you use copy and paste to make your coding easier. The only thing that's going to change here is when we click image 2, so it's now this element, the image 2 element that's listening for a click. And the procedure that we want to do is we want to say zombie has been clicked. All right? You don't have to code that from here, like copy and paste. You could have copied and pasted from the toolbox. So now I think we've got 2 events. This one is applied to image 1, which we selected before. So we have access to image 1 and image 2 down here. Okay, let's see if that works. Zombie has been clicked. Awesome. All right, so we're going to do that. You're going to do that for all 6 sounds. Or do this for all 6 images. And I would recommend you do it with the alert first, just to make sure that all of your clicks work, because that will help you to debug issues that are different from the sound issues that you might encounter. All right, now the last thing that we're going to add today is we don't really want to alert out Dexter has been clicked here. We want to play the your sound from last class that I recorded. This sound right here. Your, which you can't really hear, but I'm doing as it's doing it. We want that to play. So pretty sweet here, I added that to the cheat sheet. The functions that we use to play a sound in JavaScript is we use these 2 lines of code. So I'm going to take these 2 lines of code, and I'm going to swap those out here, right there. Now, sound is a generic word that I just put there as a placeholder. In both cases, you're going to have to replace sound with which sound you want to play. Well, the reason why we selected these audio elements is so that we could allow the JavaScript to do stuff with them. So we want to say, okay, for image 1, take audio 1, set its current play time to 0. That's going to set it from playing to play at the beginning of the file. And you could change that around if you want to. Ooh, wow. If you want to play a different part of the sound. But set the playtime to 0, so you're restarting from the beginning, and then you're going to play the sound. All right. Similarly, well, you can just go back to the cheat sheet here, copy and paste these sounds. We want to change this one to not alert out that, but to alert out the zombie sound. So what do we call the zombie sound? That was audio 2. Okay, so instead of sound here, it's going to be audio 2, and then audio 2. All right, let me refresh this here. And let's see if this works. It actually does. I was pretty stoked. It just said, "You're," when I click Dexter. All right, here we go. Let's see if the zombie works. Whoa, scary. Okay, it made like a zombie growling sound. All right, so this is what should be happening if everything is running good. There are some problems that you might encounter after doing this. Let me see if I can debug those before you encounter them. But this page runs perfectly for me. And you should do this for all 6 images. Make sure you add a sound for each. Okay, it's like surprising. I'm just like stoked that this ran so well. All right, now the issue that you might encounter, I anticipate in this, is you might encounter an issue where you might have had a really large sound file. And if you have really large sound files, what will happen is that the page will try. So you might be able to stop here actually. Stop here in code, sorry, before you watch the rest of this. And then the rest of this will refer to what you should do if you get an error about having a big sound file. I don't have any songs on my computer, I don't think. But if you have any big sound files, here's the error you might get. So your page is going to try to load those audio files from the folder into the HTML document. It might take a really long time to load a big audio sound file. I don't know how fast our websites are, but if we want to load in that audio file, what problem we can run into is that we can try to click the button and play the sound before the sound is loaded. Let me see if I can try to trigger that here. Here we go. Let's see. Okay, so I actually was able to trigger that issue. Oh no, I don't think I was. My sound is so short that it loads really quickly, but if your sound is long, it might not load before you try to click it, and it's going to give you an error. Let's see, you can check for that error here. You can make sure to avoid that error by creating this. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab an event listener. I'm going to put this at the beginning. And then what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that the whole web page has loaded. So instead of listening for a click event here, what we can do is we can say, listen for the whole page to load. And when the whole page is loaded, that means all of the sounds will be there. So we'll do a window.addEventListener. And the event we're listening for is we're waiting for the whole window to load, including all of those sounds. So we're not going to wait for a click event. We're going to tell the window, which we didn't have to select. The window is an object that comes built into JavaScript. We're going to say wait till that loads. Wait till the load event happens. And once the load event happens, we should alert out sounds are loaded. And this should make sure that the sounds are loaded before the user tries to click any soundboard things. So here we go. Let me refresh my page. My sounds are loaded very quickly. Your sounds might take a little longer to load. I notice I've left out a semicolon here. All right, so that last bit had me a little bit stumped for a second. I got kind of stuck on my words and wanted to be clear about it. But the idea here is that we're waiting for the window to experience the load event where all of the content from the HTML page, the images, the audio files, they've all loaded. Because if we try to access them before loading, they won't work. This is really useful for big audio files, but you may not have even needed this if you have small enough files. So you're okay not to have this part necessarily. All right, please do this for all 6 of your images. Select all of them, select all 6 audio elements, and then make the interactability here. You're going to start to understand where this notation comes from in JavaScript, but I think more important maybe than understanding where it comes from is it kind of makes sense. And so it should fit like kind of just like the mental framework of selecting something, adding an event listener to it, and then what you want it to do when that happens. All right, I hope this video was helpful. I feel like I dragged a bit at the end, but see you guys in class.